Welcome back to me, my bike and I. I'm just looking at the Honda DeVille today, just getting ready to do brake fluid change, bleed, etc. And it's quite interesting what you see when you pull things apart. Front's not too bad, but nevertheless gonna bleed them out. But what isn't okay is the rear reservoir. It is so low, that is below the minimum. So it doesn't surprise me, to be honest. The front one's quite easy to get to, and with the rear you've got to take plastic panels out and the seat off and get your hands in and pull off all the caps and stuff like that, which can be quite tricky. So somebody's obviously left it. Anyway, so I wasn't going to do the fluid change today because I just don't have time. But I wanted to check everything first, so glad I did, because I can just top that up a little bit now before I change it. Even if you're not mechanically minded, you really need to keep an eye on these things. That was dangerously low. That's all it needed. And you can see, look at that. The way it's gone, you can see it's all cloudy. So I'm going to get that bled over the weekend. Just can't do it right this minute. Oh, good God. I put a bit too much in there. Should be right now. It's better. Right, let's get all these bits back in on the front one. Expecting that, to see the rear brake reservoir so low. Glad I checked it. I'm just getting ready to bleed the brakes out. I don't have time to do it today, so I'm going to do it over the next few days, although you'll see it all on this one video, so we're just going to jump forward a few seconds. But in anticipation of that, I just wanted to check them to make sure they were okay while I'm still using it. I've had the bike 3 months and working my way around the servicing jobs, and that's obviously one of the really important ones. So I've checked the brake pads, they're fine. Front brake reservoir was all okay. The fluid's not too bad, but it was just very, very low on the rear. There was about 2 or 3 millimeters of fluid in there, so it was borderline dangerous. And you could see when I topped it up, it just stirred up a bit of discoloration, so they definitely need bleeding out. So we're going to do that next. Right, we're now a few days later. So a little bit of history on this bike. This is a year 2000 Honda NT650V. Started life as a naked bike, not this one, but the actual model itself. And it used to be called the NTV650. In '98 that changed to the NT650V. It became fully fared. luggage built in, etc. It went from single pot Nissin rear brake calipers to single pot Brembo, and then a few years later it went back to Nissin twin pot. This is a year 2000, it should therefore have the single pot Brembo caliper on the rear, but it's got a single pot Nissin still. So the only thing I'm not sure of is why that's on there. Were Honda just using up stock, or somebody retrofitted it? Is it the same size brake pad? And I need to know before I go ordering any brake pads. There it is, you can see it in there. Now I contacted David Silver Spares and explained, is it the same brake pads? Well, bear in mind a Nissin caliper and a Brembo caliper are two different things. And they just come back and said, yeah, on your model, which is the NT650VY for the year 2000, does have the single pot caliper, same as the 98. Like, yeah, I know, but it's Nissin, not Brembo. Is it the same pads? So anyway, I'm just going to have to order the pads and hopefully it will fit. Disc seems fine. You can probably just about see the brake pad material there, so that might be about 5mm of material. It's pretty grotty under there, doesn't it? But I've only had the bike a few months, as I said, so not down to me. I've been riding it a little bit, of course, but I'll clean all that up over time. Anyway, I don't have the replacement pads, so I did speak to David Silver Spares, as I mentioned, and I've kind of got the parts numbers and everything that I need, so I'm going to go and order all those. But for the time being, I am just going to bleed the brakes, as that was what I was planning on doing. But it's probably because that rear pad has worn down. You've got about 5mm left on that pad that size, so you probably lost about a centimetre, 10mm over both pads. So what happens there, of course, is the piston in the caliper will move out to take up the slack, if you like, and then the chamber inside the caliper expands, and then that fills with fluid, and that's drawn from the reservoir. So that's why that's obviously so low, but it should have been topped up. That's obviously been missed by the former owner, which is a little bit of a surprise. So I topped it up, but what I'm going to do now is go ahead and bleed the brakes while I'm waiting for the new pads to arrive. Clearly I'll have to siphon a little bit of fluid out again when I change the pads, but that's just a different type of job. And changing the pads in itself doesn't require a brake bleed, so I can do these two jobs separately. I won't have to do it again. There's no screws for this panel, it's just on lugs, which you've got 3, and then a little tang at the end. Should really remove this panel too, but there's always the risk that you're going to break things, so try and minimise that. And this is reasonably easy to take off. And get past it, so that's what I'm going to do. And here you go. Now normally what I do is suck some of that out and put a bit of fresh in, because as you're bleeding it through, you want to be drawing through as clean a fluid as possible, as soon as possible, rather than just drawing crap through again. But this was so low, there was nothing left in there, was there? So I'm going to just start bleeding. And that's the bleed nipple right up there. Quite awkward to get to and get a little pipe onto. Just got a 10mm ring spanner on the end there. Hopefully that's enough to crack that nut off. With the space, there's not an awful lot of room. I don't want to be taking all these fairings off. If I do have to do that, then I'll wait until I've got the pads and I'll do it all in one go. Because I can imagine changing the pads on that's going to be quite awkward as well with all this stuff in the way. Yeah, that came off okay. Didn't have any problem moving that. Just a 10mm slightly offset ring spanner. And there was enough room. Right, well you can see I've got my bleed bottle balanced there. And I've got my spanner right there, so the nipple's undone. And the hose is on top, so it's all set up just to depress the brake pedal. So this would be the easier way to do it, just by taking off this side pannier, but there's lots of nuts and bolts and fairings and all sorts that you've got to strip back, so it looks like a bit of a faff. So I'll just do it this way for now, and then when I come to do the pads, I'll need to take all this off anyway, because there are big bolts and things for the calipers that you just can't get to. And then I'll check the brakes again then, just to make sure I've got all the air out of the system, but it should be fine. Do it up, pedal up, undo it. Do it up, pedal up. Just going to check to see if any fluid's gone in there. Well, we should have done. The concern for me, that pipe's going to pop off. Normally you'd be able to hold everything, but you need like 3 or 4 pairs of hands here, so, well, maybe 2 pairs. You can see the fluid's gone down, so it's definitely pumping through and into the little catch pot. I'll just top that right up to the top. Just carry on. The hose did come off, so I did spill a bit of old brake fluid on the floor anyway, so next time I'm going to take it all completely apart and do it anyway. I've got to do the pads, and that's all going to have to come apart to do that, so when I do, I shall check the brake fluid again, just to make sure I'm not getting any further air bubbles out or anything like that. And you can't even see if you're getting any air bubbles out doing it this way, because you just can't see the hose. That has got to be singularly the most awkward brake fluid bleed I've ever done on a motorcycle. Good. Well, we'll call the rear one bled of sorts. Bled all over the floor, more like. Okay, let's get to the front. Now you can see, nice and easy to get to. Calipers there, bleed nipples right there. And so we won't have any trouble holding on to things. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to do this one first on the left side of the bike, because it is the nearest to the reservoir. So that pipe there is where the fluid comes down to the caliper on the left, and it also splits there across that rail, comes across to the right side. Now firstly, just need to make sure that we turn the steering back to pretty much straight on, so that this reservoir isn't tilted down at an angle. It's nice and level, and make sure we don't accidentally move the wheel while we're doing the bleed, because we could end up with a disaster with all this stuff pouring all out all over the place. Right. These have been off once or twice now, so they're pretty free. Right, so you can see I'm all set up ready to go on the front left Brembo caliper. I've got the pipe attached to the nipple. That's my catch tank there. And slight correction on the rear, the nipple nut was actually 8mm, not 10. This one's 11 actually, slightly odd size. So I'm just going to go and crack that off. Probably everything go flying when I do. I think that moved. There you go. So as I pump the brake lever now, all I need to do is undo it, do it up, undo it, do it up, and hopefully we'll see this fill up. Now this is probably the awkward one out of the two because it's the other side of the bike, but I can of course reach the brake lever, and I can't see it but I can reach the nipple. There you go. So what I'm going to do now is undo, squeeze the brake lever, do it up, let the brake lever go, undo, squeeze the brake lever, do it up, going to do a few more goes of this because, to be honest, spanner came off. To be honest, I'm not seeing any bubbles come out of there. I am seeing some bubbles actually, very small amounts, but I'm not sure how well those bubbles came out on video, but after a good sort of 20 pumps or so they started flowing, and I waited until they'd stopped and I had sort of 20 pumps of the lever without any bubbles coming through, and I'll call that side done. So I just need to give that a last little nip up without moving the wheel. There you go, that should do it. I'll just put the dust cap back on. Just wipe off any drips, particularly if you're taking it straight to an MOT. This one's not due for another 6 months. Can you imagine an MOT tester looking at that, seeing fluid all around there, and just fail it, wouldn't he, thinking it was leaking? Well, this one should be a lot easier because it's all on the same side. Okay, so follow the same procedure. You can see the fluid coming through. Can't see any bubbles at the moment. I think we can call that done, so I'm just going to top this back up. It should be at least, well, you've got a little minimum mark in the window there, so as long as it's above that, it doesn't have a maximum mark, but you don't want it all squirting out when you go putting the diaphragm back in and the diaphragm retainer. Not to drop any rubbish in there. Good time to replace these if they're rounded off. These are pretty good. Give it a wipe round. Catch any before it pours all over the floor. Wipe it clean. sure it's definitely nipped up. Might be worth using the ring spanner end for that. Done. And you can actually see the difference in colour there, how dark that is compared to what we've just put in. Well, here's the age-old question: should you use brake fluid from an open bottle? Personally, I do. This is a motorbike. This bike has 5 small pots. If this was going into a car, it would probably have 12 much larger pots, and most of it would be used up. I'm not going to waste it. That's not environmentally friendly, and this is perfectly okay to use. It's sealed up, it's got no moisture in it, it's not gone through any heat cycles, it's not contaminated, it's fine. You can always grease these little tangs to make them come out and in each time easier. These seem to be okay, so it's a bit of a sod to get off this seat, but it goes in okay. Thank you very much for watching. Next video is going to be doing the brake pads. On the front we've got the twin pot Brembos, and on the rear we've got the single pot Nissin off the older version of this bike. Absolutely not sure whether somebody's retrofitted that or whether Honda were just using up old stock. So I've ordered the right pads, they're on their way, and then we'll get into that when they arrive. I will need to strip back a fair bit of the fairings and panels. That does seem to be a thing that you need to do on this bike, even with things like spark plugs. Anyway, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, hit the bell, and I will see you on the next video.